you may have regret. You may very well find yourself longing. You may be longing for many things. And, as you get older, one of the things I'll say you definitely long for is your younger self. That old saying of, if I knew then what I know now, it's just become so true to me, how I might have chosen things differently when I was younger had I known, but we don't know. And so the choice I think that I made, and that I, in a sense, encourage people to make, or at least think about making, is that you can, in fact, live with regret, and you can live with longing, because every choice brings with it a consequence. It could be positive, it could be negative. There's a beautiful Zen story about, who's to say what is good and what is bad. Something can appear to be bad luck on the outside or at the outset, and then you find out later that it actually was good luck.
Welcome, my name is Andrea Thielen, I'm your host, and I'm delighted to speak today with Vicki McLeod. Hi, Vicki.
Hi.
Vicki McLeod, she's a writer, author, coach, consultant, and an award-winning entrepreneur. She is an advocate for mindful business, everyday happiness, and living a life rich with meaning. For more than 2 decades, she has helped organizations, governments, and small businesses create conversations that matter with clients, customers, and stakeholders. She has coached and mentored leaders, executive teams, and individuals to take inspiration and turn it into strategy. She leads retreats and workshops, writes poetry and a newspaper column, and bakes bread. Love that. You can find her online at vickimcleod.com and offline on beautiful Vancouver Island on the west coast of Canada, in pajamas, making something. Wonderful. Well, why I contacted Vicki is because she gave a TED Talk about the history, stigma, trends, and social impacts of choosing to be childless.
It's always interesting to listen to someone introduce you, because I think, oh, wow, I've done a lot of things. And, I'm also at a certain stage of life. I'm in my mid 60s now. So your bio gets longer as you get older, because you start adding more experiences. But it's sort of around that theme of conversations that matter, which has kind of been a theme that's run through my businesses and run through a lot of my written work as well. And I think this conversation around being child-free or childless is a conversation that's important to women. I think it's important to people in general, but it is a conversation that really sort of lands at the feet of women to deal with. And so I have always sort of had that commitment to stepping up or stepping into what's an important conversation, at least, and an important conversation for me. So this one is a little more personal, because I talk about my own experience of making the choice not to have children and what led me to that decision, together with my husband, who I married late in my life, which was also part of the decision, because for me, if you're going to have children, who are you going to parent with is a big part of the equation. And so, not sort of finding my one true love until I was, I was 42 when we sat down and had the conversation. So I'd known him for a long time, but it took a while for us to kind of get to the point where we were, oh, okay, this is what's going to happen now. So I think it was important to me to have the conversation. And I was also, actually approached by a beautiful young woman who was organizing a TEDx talk specifically geared at topics for women. And that just really, appealed to me, the fact that she was putting herself out there, she was stepping up, and she really wanted someone to speak on this particular subject. So I didn't really see myself as the voice for it, but I sort of stepped into it. And again, it follows that philosophy of, we're going to be served up opportunities. We're going to be given options, and how do we choose? And in this case, I just chose to say yes to that particular subject. But also, I think I wanted to offer a perspective on being childless from the point of view of someone who has lived most of her life, or at least, maybe 3/4 of it, because very often younger women are told you're going to regret this when you're older. And I thought, well, I'm older now. So why don't I talk about it from the place I'm sitting now?
And that's what I find so powerful. Exactly. Because that is, I think it is the number one fear so far, what I've seen in younger women that I talk to, who are either kind of struggling with that choice, whether they should have children or not, or who don't or can't have children, but that is the fear. I'm going to regret, maybe I'm going to regret this when I'm older. So
Yeah.
how is
And then the thing is, we can't predict how our lives are going to unfold. Buddhists would have us say, we're not really in control of anything. It's an illusion that we have, that we are in control. And so as our lives unfold, we are going to face different kinds of choices. We're going to have different kinds of circumstances that are going to occur. And I think the point I was really trying to make in the talk is that you may have regret. You may very well find yourself longing. You may be longing for many things. And, as you get older, one of the things I'll say you definitely long for is your younger self. That old saying of, if I knew then what I know now, it's just become so true to me, how I might have chosen things differently when I was younger had I known, but we don't know. And so the choice I think that I made, and that I, in a sense, encourage people to make, or at least think about making, is that you can, in fact, live with regret, and you can live with longing, because every choice brings with it a consequence. It could be positive, it could be negative. There's a beautiful Zen story about, who's to say what is good and what is bad. Something can appear to be bad luck on the outside or at the outset, and then you find out later that it actually was good luck. And we moved to Vancouver Island because the house that we were living in was very unstable, and it was going to slide down the slope where we lived, which seemed like incredible bad luck. However, we ended up moving to a beautiful island and living by the ocean, which seems like incredible good luck. So this idea that, I think we're somehow, there's a kind of construct that we're given that we're supposed to have perfect happiness, or we are supposed to have perfect resolve, and we don't. Being human is quite messy. How we choose to be with the messiness, I think, is what defines us. And so my encouragement, I think, especially speaking to women, as I was in that talk, is, allow yourself to be fully human, to experience all of it, to have regret, but then step into it from a place of sort of spiritual warriorship, or from a place of that confidence that is sort of the theme of your conference, right? You are actually allowed to make decisions. You're also allowed to make bad decisions. You have every right to make a bad decision. You have every right to own your own regret. It's not for anyone else to decide for you. But it's almost like this, we're sort of fed this idea that if you make a choice and then you regret it, that's it. Well, that's not it. We live with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you live with that? Because I think the fear is that it will be such an incredible sadness. And there is also some women I've encountered carry an incredible sadness to the point that it's like, I think I missed the joy of my life.
Yeah. And I think that this is, and I want to always try to be clear, like there is more than one conversation, right? So there's the one conversation, which is when you are sort of consciously making a choice or a decision that, I could have children, but I don't want to, and I'm choosing not to for various reasons. And the reasons, when I look at, the kind of comments that crop up in a TEDx talk as an example, or when I'm in conversation with women, or of all ages, really, there's many, many perspectives and many reasons. So some people simply don't like children. They're not interested. Some people have really thought about it and decided, for economic or social or other reasons, they don't want the expense of having children, nor do they want the responsibility. There's lots and lots of reasons. And then there's the other kind of conversation, which is where women, or men for that matter, who want to have children and can't for biological reasons. And that, I think, it's a different kind of conversation, and I often get kind of accused in a way of, but what about the women who want to but can't? That's a whole other conversation. And that's not really the conversation so much that I'm in, because I think, again, but I would still point to the same kind of principle, which is these are the circumstances that you've been given, and how are you going to choose to live with it? And that doesn't mean not experiencing and fully feeling the sadness or grief that you might feel at not having that opportunity, or even in making that choice, and then later on coming to say, well, I'm really sad that I made that choice. To allow yourself, first of all, to have that. You're actually, along with being allowed to make a bad decision, you're allowed to grieve it. It's part of it, part of that messy humanness. But alongside of that, bring compassion, bring compassion for yourself and for the person that made that decision when they did. In my story, I sort of tell us, I live, and I think most of us are, especially if you're of childbearing years right now, there are a lot of scientific and technical options available. So in some ways, when you're making this particular choice, you're making it in a context of, there are options for fertility, not for everyone, and they don't work for everyone. And I'm not implying that they do, but it is a choice that you do have. Many people have. So, making, even within that context, making the choice, for me, that was the interesting part, because when I made my decision, it was, my husband and I talking about, well, we do have some options here. We could look at in vitro, we could look at, egg enhancement, we could look at, there's a number of things. I was 42, so, it was a little on the far end to get started. But even looking at all of those choices and decisions and options, we still made the decision that we did. So, I think it's, how do we live with grief? How do we live with regret is the bigger kind of principle, because there will always be, I think there will always be things that we long for and things that we regret. Children being one of them, or the choice to have children being one of them, but there's all kinds of other choices we make as well.
Did you know back, did the feeling change where you're like really sure when you made this decision, and then did it come as you expected it, or did something surprise you along the way?
I think, in one way there was a big feeling of relief when I made the decision, because I think it was, okay, finally that's off the table and I just don't have to think about it and worry about it. And again, the question, I talk about that, people always asking, do you have children? How old are your children? It's very much a social ice-breaking question for women, not asked, interestingly, very much of men, but always asked of women, just about universally. So I was able to say, no, I've chosen not to have children.
Yeah.
Rather than simply no and say, well, we're talking, feeling the need to get into an explanation, which I mostly didn't, but could have gone there. So there was this sort of feeling of relief. And I think, now I look at it, there's, a couple of things that I look at in perhaps a slightly different framework than I did 5 years ago when I did the talk, which is, I think about the sort of genetic piece of it. There was a lot of work that went into the Q, and I talked about this when we first met. There was a lot that happened, in order for all of my ancestors to live through what they lived through, all of, the perilous times that they must have gone through to get to this particular space and time for me to be here. And I'm kind of saying, okay, well, that's it. And there's sort of a part of me, and the more I kind of examine these things, or the more that becomes available to us, in terms of technology and genetics, I think, is this really the end of the genetic line? And then I, again, go to my kind of belief system, which is that, we are all connected anyway. And if I really wanted to store some genetic material, I probably can. We probably have the technology. So that, that was one sort of thought that I had that was sort of new in the last 5 years, is sort of around, what is this drive, the drive that we have to keep the genetic line going? And do I have some obligation there? And I don't really feel like I do. And in that I have siblings as well who have kind of chosen to have children and carried on that line. But again, I think we live in a time where there's many options. There's many options available. It just came up, but not really as a big concern. It was sort of like, a pondering in our times.
Okay, so overall, it kind of felt right, still feels right, the decision that you made all these years.
Yeah, and it's an interesting, I think, I talk about this in the talk as well. Like, I really do like children. I like children. We don't have a lot of children in our lives right now. It's partly because our whole, all of us and our siblings were all at a certain age. Most of the nieces and nephews are adults now. We're getting into the territory of great nieces and great nephews. And so there's babies starting to be around again. But for a long time, there just weren't that many around us. So I really enjoy the time that I do get to spend with especially small children, because there doesn't seem to be that many around, in our personal life. But I also, look around my home and the kinds of things that my husband and I have chosen to do, the travel that we've done, the way that we've been able to explore creatively, the lack of pressure that we feel to have to reserve a certain amount of either our income or our resources. It feels like a lot of freedom. And, that's also been a very important principle for me. And I hope I make this point in the talk, and I'd love to make it today, which is, we get to choose the kind of life that we want, and hopefully that life is going to be based on our own values, and so some people value family and having multiple generations and carrying on that tradition, that they were perhaps raised with. And I say, more power to you. Like, have as many children as you want, and if that's what you want for your life, then have that. I know for me, I had a very strong value around freedom and creative expression. And I would never argue that having children prevents you from doing that, but I know that I have felt a sense of freedom from not having to have to concentrate on much more beyond myself and my husband in terms of our needs. And I think that's something that a lot of parents, feel, that really almost overwhelming pressure and stress of having to provide for other human beings constantly. There's no reprieve from it. And so for me, I sort of appreciate the freedom of my life. And I do have friends with children who often say to me, I hope you really appreciate how much freedom you have. And I say, I try to, I do try to, because it's a value that I've had, and I've always been a little bit unconventional, and I've always wanted to kind of live in my own way. And that hasn't always been easy. It hasn't necessarily been an easy road, but it's been the one that I felt I could wake up to and kind of look at myself in the mirror and feel good about that.
What's an advice you would give to women who are feeling the same way, who are also maybe living unconventionally and want to continue to do so, but oftentimes maybe run into some roadblocks or even opinions of others that make it not that easy?
It's a hard one, right? We all of the sort of, I guess the sort of self-help lingo would be, what other people think of you is none of your business. And, and to let go of the approval of others, right? It's very hard to do. It's a very hard thing to do in practice. I think one of the things that's really important is something like what you're doing here, is to be in conversation with other people who are thinking about the same things. Doesn't mean siloizing yourself and isolating yourself to only one point of view, but for people who are really willing to talk about it. Those who are trying to make the decision themselves, those who have made the decision, those who maybe made the opposite decision, and really take, almost, I love the approach of taking a research approach, right? Almost take a research approach to who is doing what and why are they doing it, and how is that like me? And having, especially if you are going to choose, whether it's this subject or some other unconventional way of being, that you sort of find people who can support you on your path, who are willing to be open to the ideas that you have and willing to be alongside of you. They don't have to be the same as you, and they don't have to even agree with you, but are they willing to stand alongside you? Some of my, very close friends, the saying that we use with each other is that I'll always stand where you can see me. Doesn't mean that I will be 100% in agreement with every choice you make, but I will always be where I can be seen by you. So that way we know that there's someone there, and not to step into the shadow or to step away, and that would be, a further piece of advice to people as well, as, don't be afraid to step forward into that conversation with others. Because as much as you may be longing for someone who may hear you out, they are also longing for the same thing. And I found that that's been really, of value to me, is to talk not only with people who have children, but people who don't have children as well. I have a really interesting balance. About half my female friends do not have children, and the other half do. And it's I always think it's interesting that we sort of found each other in some way. So I always have someone who I can say, do you want to, do you want to go to the spa? And they're going to say yes, because they don't have to worry about a babysitter. Or do you want to go to Mexico this winter? It's nice to have that. And of course, as my women friends that we've all aged and now their children are grown, those women are joining in too. But I've always appreciated having that mixture, mixture of perspectives.
Oh, wow. So it sounds pretty, your life sounds pretty good, I would say.
Well, it's, I would think, you kind of, you have to be prepared for the life you want to live. You have to be ready for it. And I work with a lot of people, and it's interesting. Sometimes people say, well, I really want to be like an international speaker, and I want to, be on global stages all around the world. And I think, great, how do you feel about flying? Oh, I hate flying. Well, you can only live the life that you're prepared to have. And so I think in some ways I laid the groundwork for my life, and I really chose, to design a life that I wanted consciously. What's working, what's not working. We do, my husband and I do, we always do a check-in at the new year. I usually do one in September as well. What's working, what's not working, where do we need to tweak things up? It's gotten much looser over the years, but at times we've been pretty rigorous about, even, assigning a 1 to 10 scale, how is this working? What do we need to either sustain, or what do we need to change? And, it's not a life without sorrow. It's not a life without fear. It's all the things that life brings, but it's also, I think, bringing a certain openness or readiness to experience that too. We had a loss recently, and my thought was, we get to have this too. We get to have this feeling of, great love lost, and be with that, and be then again just move into that sort of compassionate space with it. I do tend to a Buddhist point of view, which is, like there is all life is a bit of suffering. I mean, I do believe that. And so it's how do I want to be with that? That kind of, I think it allows me a certain freedom.
No, I can feel that. I can feel that you have that. And that I think that is amazing and beautiful about you, that you have that, and also really freeing. So you are able to live that life, and things come as they come, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't then change it anyway, right?
Yeah, and it dials down. I just think often this conversation is about, well, it's a big decision and you might regret it. It makes the stakes so high. It's so that if you can think about, yes, I might regret it, and how do I want to be with that regret if I do?
And
then
how
you
are
start
you then with that regret?
Sorry?
But what do you do? What do you do when you feel that regret? Do you feel that regret sometimes?
At times. I mean, not necessarily so much about the children. I have regrets about other things probably that are more prevalent to me than the choice about children. But I first of all acknowledge my humanness. I'm a human doing the best I can. And, again, moving into that position of sort of self-comfort of like, yes, of course you regret this. Of course it hurts. It would hurt anyone. Anyone would feel this way about that. And it's all right. And I'm here for you. Like, I'm here for you. So having that sense of taking your own side and having your own back, I'm here. And then always the question that I tend to follow things with is, what do you need? What do you need in this moment? And sometimes it's external, like sometimes it's another person or words of comfort or, a reading resource. I have a lot of, really beautiful books that I will rely on. And sometimes it's internal, just that need that moment to just soften with self, to just say, okay, just soften. It's all right. It's okay to feel this way.
In which situations does that come up? These feelings?
It can come up in like a day, like it could be like the storm of daily life, where a disappointment occurs, or I've made a mistake, I forgot to go on someone's Zoom, or it can be like something minor, or it can be something larger, where I'm revisited about, for example, when my natural father died, I chose not to go to his bedside, and that is a decision I have regretted, absolutely. And one of those things I can see now, what it would have meant to my younger self then to have done it, but it was the choice I made based on the circumstances at the time and who I was at the time. What I had as personal resources, my wings were quite limited. And so that comes up, it comes up on certain anniversaries, for example, his birthday or the anniversary of his dying. And to remind myself, yes, I'm only human. I made the only choice I could, that I thought I could make at the time. And if I had it to do over, yes, I would do it differently, and I live with it, I live with it. And so those are the kinds of, and that's what I say, like the choice about children is definitely a large life choice, but there are many others that will cross your path and continue to cross your path, and choices will be made, and you will live with those choices in one way or another. And I guess I don't really like to use the word advice, but my advice would be is, to develop some rigor around, some loving rigor around being with your own pain in a way that's compassionate. And then it becomes less fearful. It's almost like then it's not, the stakes aren't as high. It's not as fearful because you kind of have a method or tools with which to be with that. And that you do, and you come to trust it. The more that you exercise it, the more that you can trust that it's going to be there when needed. So I sort of have that trust now when something comes my way, I think, I can be with this. I know how to be with this now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What would you say is like one thing you would tell also younger women to maybe do already or watch out for once you get older, that comes when you don't have children, circumstances that can show up that you should prepare for? Because
really
it's
great
like
question.
a little different lifestyle, in terms of like family, yes, maybe the loneliness, maybe not having younger people around, or I don't know, does that influence?
Yeah, it's such a big question in one way. I'm almost wanting to answer it in a funny way, because I've just noticed this in myself, is that I have started to really like to shop at baby stores.
Okay.
And and I luckily have a younger friend, and she just adopted a baby girl, and so I've had a lot of fun shopping for her. It's like, so that's something I just didn't expect that. I didn't expect that I would be drawn to that sort of thing, in a way, just because there's just not a lot of babies in my life, but I really am. And so I don't know if that's an expression of a kind of longing for grandchildren or something. We have agreed to call me a granty, which is a term I love. So, and the kind of role is to kind of be there in a sense, to support the family at times that they might need it, in a very gentle way and in a very non-invasive way, because we're not like family, not blood family. And also to restrain myself from buying too many things, because this particular family is not really that material. And so it's like, I'll just buy, one or two really things that I think are really useful or really apply to their lifestyle. So, it is, I think it'll come and go in different ways. And so I just think to trust yourself, first and foremost. You are the best judge of what's right for you. And you will get a lot of pressure from a lot of different places to make different decisions, but you need to make the decision that's right for you, because at the end of the day, you're living with yourself. And if you know it's a decision that you can live with, that's all you really need to know. Yeah. And I think we know in our culture, it's very at least in the West or in industrialized countries, it's a very pro-family, it almost seems sometimes I think, oh my, the world was just designed for families. And yet on one hand, I think that's a really good thing. Like, I think, do we not want to be a culture that supports families? I think we do. I think we want to support families. And I think we want to see mothers have an easier time of it. And I think we want to have lineups for people with children so that they can get through the checkout quicker in the airport, because the babies are hungry. So I think there's some things that we set up to be like, oh, that's, everything is pro-family, but yet, yes, we do want to be pro-family, I think. And at the same time, we also want to have a full support for people to have a choice around that. Like, have a choice around that. And yeah.
How does your Christmas look like? Because that is such a family.
It is. It's interesting, because we were in a sense, the relatives that didn't have kids, we were expected to travel for most of our Christmases. And one, I don't even know when it was about 10 years ago, I guess, maybe a little more. My husband and I just said, we're not doing that anymore. Like, we don't have to be the ones that travel just because we don't have kids. So we we started doing different things at Christmas. Sometimes we would just go away. We had a property in the South. And so we would go south for Christmas and have like these wonderful, tiny little small Christmases that were so easy and trouble-free. And sometimes we would invite, we would say, we're having Christmas and anyone can come that wants to. And so sometimes people did and sometimes they didn't. And of course, we had lots of friends that would come. And Christmas this year, we're actually going to my sister-in-law's. We are choosing to travel because we have our great niece who we have not yet met because of the COVID circumstances. So we are really looking forward to meeting our niece, our great niece that we've not yet met. She will be there, and that will be a great joy, because I think, at a certain age, children and Christmas is just like, it's almost as much fun as watching little kids play hockey, If you're ever in a bad mood, just watch a kid start unwrapping presents and you'll feel really good. We say that in Canada, if you're ever in a bad mood, go watch the toddlers play hockey, because you'll just feel so good afterward. Because they're so present, like they're just so into it and so 100% committed. And so little kids at Christmas are kind of like that. There's nothing else, right? So yeah, it varies. And the holidays for me are, I've also with Christmas sort of renegotiated my relationship with Christmas a few years ago and just decided I was going to do what I felt like doing at Christmas rather than what was expected. And it made Christmas so much easier.
Okay, and which is what? Because Christmas and all these celebrations, I think for some people are really difficult, just in general already. But then it can be also if you are maybe alone or chose not to have a family, then that is the time when this comes up probably.
Yeah, it can certainly. It's like it's a time it's more in your face. I would say also back to school time. And there's certain and I often joke, like, people, I often don't know there's like a national holiday because we don't have kids in school, so we don't know that it's a day off. So it's kind of like there's certain cultural markers that are happening that have to do again with that family orientation that we don't often, my husband and I sometimes just don't clue into. And I just think, but it's also like about that awareness. Like if you are a person that knows that Christmas is difficult for you, either because you're getting a lot of pressure from family, because you've chosen not to have a family, or because you do feel a sense that it's a family time and you might be missing something, it's to kind of, how can you prepare for that? What, and ask that's that beautiful question, like, what do I need? What do I need at this time of year? Do I need a close friend to be with me? Do I need to go away and be somewhere where it's not quite, the same kind of pressure isn't put on the holidays? If you travel, different countries do these holidays very differently. Some of them don't even have these holidays, first of all. So you have, again, it's like a sort of almost like a self-responsibility, how can I take the best possible care of myself in this circumstance? And I know I decided, this is quite a few years ago now, not to do Christmas with my family. The first time I chose not to do that. And I was single at the time. And it was partly because my family, there's a long history of addiction and alcoholism, and Christmases were not always, really sort of hallmark picture postcards, and certainly raised a lot of issues for me. And I thought, what, I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to invite my own friends over on Christmas Eve. I'll let my family know if anyone wants to come. But I will not be going to the family for Christmas Day. And I decided to volunteer somewhere for Christmas Day. It was a wonderful experience. And surprisingly, my mom and dad chose to come to my house on Christmas Eve. Like, it was just totally, it was totally unexpected. So by my saying, no, I'm not coming, they said, okay, well, we'll come to you then. And it was really quite beautiful. And they met these friends that they hadn't met before, and then they left, and they had Christmas Day with the rest of the family and did all the things. And I went to volunteer Christmas morning. And so, it was really, you don't know what's going to be, the way that things might work in your favor, you don't know. And I do really hold this space of trusting that what's emerging is what needs to emerge. It's unfolding the way it's meant to unfold. And I just need to, apply my own clarity about what I'm wanting into that. And that was a beautiful example to me of just, taking a stand in a way, and then having it come, like, love kind of came back to me. It wasn't like a huge drama, like, oh my gosh, you're not gonna, it was like, oh, okay, well, we'll come to your place then. What are you making? Okay, then we'll do it that way. Yeah.
Just because you just mentioned that there was like a lot of alcoholism and addiction, is that partly why you chose not to have children in your own family?
I do think so, yes. I'd have to say, this is something I've pondered quite a bit, and we've actually talked about it quite a bit in the family, because maybe not surprisingly, but in our family, more of the women don't have children than do. Which wasn't really something that occurred to me until quite late in my life. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. And so just looking at sort of a lot of the epigenetic research, dealing with my own recovery, I think there's a part of me that had some fear of bringing a child that may be subjected to that. I mean, I do feel like I've sort of broken the cycle in my family, and my brother as well. However, we don't understand it all yet. We're still getting to understand the role of DNA and these kinds of things. And so I do think probably on a more subconscious than conscious level, that is definitely at play. It wouldn't surprise me at all if wasn't, like I say, it wasn't very super conscious. But I think it was this idea of, I'm not sure that this is a kind of, chaos that's necessary to bring a child into, and not to say, I mean, my family's, I really don't want to mischaracterize my family. They're very loving, but we have had these issues, and they've been ongoing, and they've been multi-generational, and those that are well and healing and doing a great job of it. And those that aren't, most of them we lost, unfortunately. So, but it's an awareness. Again, it's an awareness. What are the circumstances? What are the circumstances that I'm in, and what, where do I want to go? And I do see, sadly, many people who did like what we would say the standard things. They graduated high school, they went to university, they found a spouse, they got married, they had children, they have grandchildren, and there's the children are struggling. It's not. People often say to me, well, you won't have anyone standing at your bedside when you die. Like, who's going to look after you when you're old? And I'm thinking, a lot of my friends, their children are not looking after them. My friends are still looking after their children, their adult children, because there is a lot of sadness. There's a lot of tragedy in this world. And we have it set up. I love what you say about changing the story. We have this story, this narrative set up. And that's not necessarily the narrative that people are actually living.
Right. That's one of the last things I would like to ask you, because I'm very much about like also evolving our identity as women to
Mhm.
allow different narratives, to allow different lifestyles, because maybe we actually have an inner knowing what fits and doesn't fit us, and maybe it also
Mhm.
makes sense in the end, and that there
Mhm.
is a place for for every woman, whether children or not children, that it's actually quite well laid out, as you can then support maybe other families or
Mhm.
whatever you else do, right?
Mhm.
Can you just say something about what is your
Yes,
take?
well, I mean, I think it's like the contribution. We all have a contribution to make, and we can make that contribution in, kind of large headline making ways, and we can make that contribution in very small ways, just by standing for each other. And so I think that there is this, and I do think that the world is evolving. We're having a very specific conversation about women and childlessness, but we are moving into what one of my professors at university calls a gender revolution. We are moving into a time on the planet when these lines and the directions that, or the roadmaps that these lines lay out for us, are not clear anymore. They're really blurring, and so we're going to be required, I think, as humanity is going to be required to open more, to allow for more kinds of expression, to allow for more kinds of partnering, to allow for more kinds of families. Even the notion of family, if you go worldwide, the notion of family is very different in somewhere, for example, like Iceland, than it is here in Canada. The
Mm.
way that families are treated is the way that the family unit is considered, even things like divorce. Here we have shaming language, broken families. In some countries, they don't have any shaming language around that. It's an expected stage that you're going to go through as part of your life cycle. So we have to be very careful that we don't sort of lay all of our own sort of cultural expectations and norms onto the planet and onto the way that humanity is changing, because it is changing. And personally, I find it exciting. I find it kind of exhilarating. I think it's going to be very freeing. It's not going to be trouble-free. So the question for me would be, how can we contribute in the most meaningful, compassionate way to this change? How can we stand alongside this change and still be true to ourselves? Still be true. I think that's an important aspect. To get up every day and live in your own truth is not an easy thing to do, and yet we need to do it, and we need to allow other people the space to do that too. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So true. So true. And I think if we can do that, which is not easy, but if we can do that, we're off to a better world.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we need it.
Yeah.
Something different is needed, and I just have my spidey senses are up saying, I think that what we're seeing emerge just in terms of neurodiversity, in terms of gender diversity, I think this is what the world needs, and that's why it's showing up. And so I think we need to kind of like, how can we mother it? How can we mother that?
Mhm. Mhm.
How can we mother change? That would be a great question, I think, for those of us that choose to be child-free, can ask ourselves, what else can we mother then?
Mm.
To use that term, nurture and support and love.
Oh, I love that. Yes. How can we mother change? That is
Mhm.
beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
Amazing. One last thing, because you said before that you were reading a book. You have beautiful books in times of regret or inner
Yeah.
turmoil. Can you share one or two titles?
Recommend one. So I would recommend highly the book. It's just called Fear, and it's a really simple book, and it's Thich Nhat Hanh, who you may be familiar with. And I'm not entirely sure I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but Buddhist monk who just passed away, I think, in 2021. But the book is just called Fear, and it's a beautiful. I actually probably have it. Wait, I do. I wasn't expecting this question, but I do actually I honestly keep this book right by my desk at all times. It is, yes,
I have a copy everywhere.
here it is, to promote the book. Essential Wisdom for Getting Through the Storm.
Ah,
And it's just a beautiful book, and I keep it nearby all the time, and I'll often just open to any page. I've read it through, and I'm studying it with some friends right now as well to go a little deeper. But you can just open it almost any page. Like I opened it up and it said, "The heart is a bridge," just now.
mm.
So that's like a beautiful. So that's another tip. Keep things that you feel really nourishing nearby.
Mm, mhm.
Tea and a Buddhist monk.
Okay, tea and the Buddhist monk. What wonderful,
Hmm,
wonderful.
yeah.
Thank you so much, Vicky, for your time and for this beautiful talk. Thank you
Thank you.
very
Thank you also. It's been really wonderful. And I just really want to say congratulations to you for pulling the summit together. I think it's an important conversation in that you're creating a place for women worldwide to be able to connect on this subject it's just wonderful.
Thank you, Vicky. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Then I'm gonna make a zoop then. Thank you. Thank you. This was
Yeah.
great. Thank you so much.
Good, good. Well, I mean, we sort of went in a lot of different directions and I sort of tried to keep talking. If that's helpful. But anyway, yeah.
No, this was no, absolutely no. This was great. This was great. I mean, because I think this is exactly, a lot of these points that women are wondering about,
Mhm.
and it's very
Yeah, and I
obvious.
think your questions were really good. Like I think you were, it was really helpful. Like you were kind of, give me an example of that, or what is this like now? And I know I
Mhm.
was interviewed by a writer, a UK writer, who's doing his upcoming book is about, and the main character in it is childless, and so he was interviewing various women just to try to get perspectives, and he had seen the TEDx talk as well, and he was really good. Like he said, okay, so there's got to be something more specific that you regret, like he was like really getting, and I did say to him, which I didn't say to you, but I mean, you can use it if you like, uh, is that, I do sometimes wonder what a daughter of mine would be like,
Mm.
like I do sometimes have that. And then he said, yes, that's what I'm looking for, thank you. But I thought it was just such a good question because he just kind of,
Yeah.
and I felt your questions were kind of like that you just kept going to like, let me go a little deeper here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that is something that I do wonder. Like I think I do wonder what
Hmm.
kind of daughter would I have had,
Hmm.
and I'll never know. And
Yeah.
I can look at my friends' daughters and I see some great examples, and then I see some where I think, oh, what, I could have that daughter too, and that would be that would not be a good ride. And it would not be an easy ride anyway. It might be good, but yeah.
Okay, okay. But so then you had like maybe like a little shift of perspective in later life that you did wonder more about like how your children
So I
would.
do kind of, because I think I have a really wonderful, although it's been very difficult, but it's really wonderful relationship with my mom.
Mm-hmm.
And and she has also a really good relationship with my sister. And I do think that there's something special in that mother-daughter relationship. So I've never really wondered what a son would be like. It's funny. Like
Ah,
that's never been something that I've wondered about, but I have wondered about, I wonder if I'd had a daughter, what she would be like. Like,
would be
would she
like,
be creative, or would she be,
yeah.
bright, or would she be, addicted? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. But those are like the kinds of, I do
Yeah.
wonder, that a little bit. But again, I think that kind of goes in that territory of there's always things we're gonna wonder. I do wonder how life would have been if I'd moved to Paris when in my 20s instead of the Kootenays, it was an
Okay.
option. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think there's a way that you're always going to wonder things, like you're going to wonder, what if I had chosen this career instead of that career, or if I had chosen, travel over school, or chosen, I always think.
But there's things that you wonder about that are more kind of like neutral, and then you wonder, you're like, huh, maybe I would have been different. And then these types of decisions, they're like, and you feel like, it's kind of like pulling you a little bit, because it's
Mhm,
kind of like
mhm.
more painful to think maybe that would have been better.
Yeah, yeah. And we don't know, like with so many choices, we just don't know if it would have been. And I do really love that Zen story, like who's to say what is good and what is bad?
Hmm.
We really
Hmm.
don't know. We
We don't
really,
know.
and there's some interesting, I don't know, I don't really know off the top of my head, but there are some like very interesting films. You might know them, where they sort of explore, like an incident happens and then the character goes in this direction, but if they
Oh
had
yeah,
gone in a different
yeah.
direction, right?
There's a
That
German
kind of,
film.
yes, yeah. So it's that kind of thing, right? Like that is very much, how our minds do work, is like, okay, if I had chosen this path.
Yeah, yeah.
And the thing I think about being human that's interesting is that we often assume that it would have been the better path.
The other one then.
Yeah, but not necessarily. And again, like when I do see
No.
my friends who have had children and that's what they committed to and that's what they wanted to do, and they were, you know, all in. And I see that in many cases, just the tragic amount of heartbreak that they're experiencing now. Like that was not what they imagined when they chose that path. That wasn't what they were signing up for.
No,
They
I
weren't
know,
signing up-
I know,
yeah,
I
they
know.
weren't
This
signing up for that, and that's what they got, you know.
because the
And
children
so,
are now like addicted or not really functioning
Mhm.
right.
yes, yeah, or going through, you know, a lot of painful stuff. And so, you know, again, it's what we think that the story is going to be like versus what the story actually
Exactly.
unfolds. And
Exactly.
we make up a lot. We're making stuff up all the time. It's how we get through our day. So we make up a lot of things. And the question is how, what's needed to actually have that occur, but we're making out. Yeah. And much of it's out of our control anyway. So
Thank you so much, Vicki, for that. Thank you.
yeah, luck with all of it. I'm really looking forward to the summit happening.